This was the last argument we had before heading to court. After Barbara was served the divorce papers, we both played our roles like actors on a stage. I feigned a desire to salvage our marriage, but the moment I saw the photograph of her kissing Bradley Jacobson, I knew our 35-year union was over. The decision had already been made. As I watched the first few minutes of the private investigator's video, I mentally buried our relationship for good. I couldn't decipher what Barbara was pretending. Barbara Smith, perhaps she thought we could still talk about her ongoing affair, or that we could reach some agreement allowing her to stay married to me while continuing her relationship with Bradley. Barbara Smith, my wife and a lawyer, had a way of making the irrational seem rational, a skill she clearly brought home from work. At home, she wielded this talent freely. Oscar, be reasonable, was her go-to phrase throughout our 35 years together. However, after I filed for divorce, she adopted a new favorite, fragile male ego. For instance, Oscar, it's not about who I'm seeing. It's about your fragile male ego. I began to loathe that phrase, so it was no surprise that our last conversation didn't last long before she said it again. Oscar, if you could just manage your fragile male ego, you'd realize none of this threatens you. She smiled warmly, trying to reassure me. I don't love him, and in a few months, this will all be behind us. We can still have our happy ending. You had to admire Barbara's audacity. She said all this while absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her wine glass with her fingers. On the kitchen table next to her lay a manila folder containing the divorce papers and incriminating photos from the investigator. Yet Barbara continued discussing reasonableness, as if I could simply set aside my fragile male ego and save our marriage. The issue was that she thought we were still negotiating, while I had already checked out mentally. I just wanted it all to end. Barbara, can we pause for a moment? Oscar Smith, interrupted her mid-sentence. You keep mentioning my fragile male ego and saying that if I could just get over it, everything would be fine. What do you mean by that? She stopped, frowning slightly, clearly annoyed by my interruption. It's simple, Oscar. You're afraid of competition. You're worried you won't measure up. She smiled this time, a hint of pity in her eyes. But don't worry, you're still my man. And Bradley? I asked, noticing her blush. Bradley? She hesitated for a moment before responding. Bradley is just a distraction, like a gym membership. I'm not replacing you or stopping loving you. There's nothing for you to worry about. I looked at her in mild bewilderment, the kind of expression husbands often wear when they want their wives to feel superior, usually to deflect attention. So just to be clear, you think I'm afraid you'll stop loving me or replace me with someone younger? She nodded, her smile widening. And you believe that makes me insecure, that I need support? I asked, dragging out the words as if trying to grasp something. Exactly, darling. There's nothing to worry about, she repeated, patting my hand in a condescending manner. And this insecurity is because I'm a man? I asked, barely holding back my irritation. Oh, Oscar, it's all men. All men have fragile egos, not just you, she said, her smile triumphant. All men have fragile egos. It's our job as wives to help you stay confident so you remain stable. I wanted to explode, to demand an explanation of how a relationship with a 35-year-old could support me. But I knew that if I gave in to my emotions, she would only dig her heels in deeper. Barbara suddenly became enamored with this pop psychology nonsense about how women are stronger than men, and it didn't surprise me at all. We had been avoiding these topics for years, but I was exhausted. We were nearing the end of our road, and I was tired of pretending to agree. Barbara, you've been discussing this for a long time now, I said, looking her straight in the eye, and I've been turning a blind eye. After 35 years together, I've learned which battles to fight. But today, if I want you to remember one thing, it's this. This whole argument is complete absurdity. She tried to interrupt, but I wouldn't let her derail me. The reason people talk about the fragile male ego is that it's truly unusual. You've seen the videos. How often have you seen a man get hit in his most vulnerable spot? She nodded, acknowledging the truth of my words. For a moment, I thought she might back down, but I knew her better than that. Women are fragile, weak, I continued. And it seems amusing, at least from a woman's perspective, because men appear so strong. But one hit can take us down, and we're left writhing, gasping for air. Do you understand what I'm saying? I asked. She nodded again, but I wasn't done. Now imagine if a woman were hit in the same way. Nobody would laugh, right? She agreed. Why not? If one person's pain seems funny, why isn't the other's? Because it's cruelty, she replied. When a man hits a woman, it's cruelty. And when a woman hits a man, isn't it? I shook my head. Forget it. That's not the point. The point is, we don't laugh when a woman is hurt because society tells us women are fragile and weak. So when a woman cries, nobody finds it funny. She looked puzzled, so I pressed on. It's the same with ego. At work, my friends constantly joke about my job, my body, my hair, anything they can find, and I just let it pass. Now imagine if your friends did that to you. Imagine going to work every day and they constantly pointed out your most painful insecurities. How would you feel? Oh God, she said, horrified. I can't imagine women doing that to each other. Definitely not all the time. Exactly, but that's what we strong men do. We laugh it off, make jokes, and move on. I patted her hand lightly, unsure if she noticed the hint of condescension in my tone. The truth is, the only place I allow myself to be fragile and vulnerable is here at home. Here, I lower my defenses, take off my armor, and show my soft side, hoping you won't take advantage of it. What you call my fragile male ego is simply my willingness to be vulnerable in the one place I feel safe. Do you understand? Barbara smiled and nodded, but I could sense she was bracing herself for a counterargument. You can be vulnerable, she said. Yes, Oscar, she replied. Here, you're safe. You can be vulnerable. I'm not going to destroy what we've built over some meaningless affair. I sighed, removing my glasses and pinching the bridge of my nose. You still don't understand, Barbara. I believed you when you said I was the best lover you've ever had, even though I knew that couldn't possibly be true. How could it be? I've only had one partner in 35 years. I managed a weak smile. I believed you when you claimed I was enough for you, that my size was perfect, and that my body still excited you. I took your words at face value, even when I suspected you were just flattering my ego. I chose to trust you and be vulnerable, thinking you wouldn't betray that trust. But you did, I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. Barbara's eyes widened in shock, and she fell silent. Taking a deep breath, I struggled to keep the tremor out of my voice. For about a year now, I've noticed how carelessly you've treated my vulnerability. The way you reacted when I undressed, how you averted your gaze during intimate moments. I couldn't ignore it any longer, and those comments you made, which seemed like innocent suggestions about going to the gym more or drinking less beer. I heard every single one. She looked stunned, but I pressed on. I started to see changes in our connection. You stopped sharing the little details of your day and ceased asking about mine. You were around less and less, even before Bradley entered the picture. I felt you no longer provided the safe space you once did. You weren't the one who protected my feelings anymore. I paused, feeling a tightness in my throat. She, a lawyer, seemed at a loss for words. I held back tears, keeping my gaze locked on hers. Her eyes glistened, and I knew mine did too, but I fought against the urge to cry. Barbara, I tried. I truly tried. I took you out to dinner more often, complimented your outfits. I planned trips just for the two of us and carved out time to be together. I did everything in my power to remind you of how much you meant to me. I dressed better and even started working out again, hoping it would evoke memories and remind you of how important I used to be in your life. Looking down at my hands, I fought back tears again. Not now. I couldn't allow her to see me break. I couldn't afford that vulnerability anymore. but nothing seemed to work. It was never enough. You always had excuses to cancel our dinners, explanations for why we couldn't go on trips. When I told you how beautiful you looked, I saw in your eyes the doubt about whether I knew you were dressing for him. And when I sent flowers to your office, your silence was deafening. I looked at her again. Later, when you began picking fights just to avoid spending time with me, I realized I had lost you. You had forgotten how special I once was to you, and in turn, you lost that unique place in my heart. I never used arguments as a means to avoid intimacy. I sighed in frustration. Is this really all you took away from our relationship, Barbara? Why can't you be honest? If not with me, then at least with yourself. You've been pushing me away for the past year. She cast a quick glance my way, then lowered her gaze to her hands that still felt achingly familiar. I shrugged slightly. Yes, I shrugged slightly. Back then, my ego was fragile. I spent so much time in my office mourning the slow death of what we had. I tried to maintain the appearance of strength, the same strength I project at work, so you wouldn't see how deeply you were hurting me. I began to find reasons to avoid home, to escape someone who seemed intent on hurting me without even trying to hide it. She looked shocked, and I smiled gently, lightly touching her hand. But you'll be pleased to know that my fragile ego has healed. I filled my life with new experiences and found people who make me feel valued again. She looked up, and I noticed a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. I couldn't help but smirk. No, I didn't cheat on you, but I did realize that some of the women at the gym are less annoyed by my presence. When I finally gathered enough evidence and began consulting a lawyer, you had no idea how shattered my fragile ego had become. Is that all? I wondered. I had said everything I needed to, and for the first time, I believed she truly heard me. Perhaps now we could find a way to move forward. But of course, I was married to a lawyer. For her, there are no lost cases. Oscar, that wasn't necessary, she shouted. Yes, I was distracted, I admit it, but I never stopped loving you. In my heart, you were always number one. I'm sorry I didn't realize how much I was hurting you, and how fragile you really were. Barbara continued to speak, weaving vivid images with her words, but I had already tuned her out. The word fragile echoed again. She still didn't understand, and I suddenly recognized that she probably never would. I wasn't going to soften the blow any longer. Barbara, stop, I said sharply. I knew she could hear the irritation in my voice despite my efforts to suppress it. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, I continued, You really don't get it, do you? You're convinced this is about me, about my fragility, about some fragile male ego, right? There's nothing wrong with that, I added, maintaining a steady tone. Everyone, men and women, has an ego that's fragile to some extent. We all rely on those we love to protect it. But yes, men can be particularly sensitive in this area. I leaned forward, holding back the sarcasm that threatened to spill out, though she certainly wasn't making it easy. Let me share a little secret, Barbara. For most of our 35 years, I've been careful with the truth when it came to you. When you asked if that lipstick looked right, or if that dress was too tight, I searched for words that conveyed the truth without hurting you. I didn't want you going out looking like a clown or, worse, something else. Her face flushed, and her eyes widened at the bluntness of my words. She clearly wasn't accustomed to this level of honesty, and I couldn't help but find it slightly amusing. Barbara, when I said things like, I don't think that shade of lipstick matches your top, or maybe you should change. I don't want the neighbors talking about your cleavage. I wasn't hesitating or unsure. I was giving you a chance to reconsider without crushing your self-esteem. I paused, allowing the weight of my words to sink in. Do you know why I did that? She shook her head, visibly confused. Because I didn't want to hurt your ego. That's absurd, she snapped, her face twisting in anger. I can remember plenty of times when you didn't hold back at all. I chuckled softly. I admit I wasn't perfect. We both recall the time I said your eyeshadow made you look like a streetwalker, or when I agreed the dress wasn't exactly flattering on you. Her eyes darkened at the memory, the famous cold silence that followed, along with a sarcastic thanks for your honesty, and of course, the weeks of icy distance between us. That was when I realized that blunt honesty wasn't always the best approach, especially regarding my opinion of her appearance. So you've been lying to me for 35 years? Barbara shot back, her voice filled with fury. It was time to end this conversation. Let's just call it an edited version of the truth. I told you that you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, that your workouts made you look younger by a few years, that even Venus would envy your figure. I gave you the same lavish compliments you offered me. It was my way of showing how I saw you, and yes, perhaps a little bit to protect your ego too. My ego isn't fragile, she snapped, clearly insulted. Barbara, I said, locking eyes with her, you have a big ass. Her reaction was immediate. Shock froze her expression as if she'd been struck in the chest. What? I smiled, though my words were harsh. You have stretch marks. Your breasts aren't as firm as they used to be. Your hair is starting to gray, and your teeth aren't as white as they once were. Those expensive creams you buy don't hide the wrinkles or your double chin. Maybe it's time to accept aging gracefully because fighting it isn't working anymore. Her mouth fell open, her eyes wide in disbelief. Every word landed precisely where I intended. Oh my God, she whispered, utterly stunned. Barbara, remember the feeling you have right now? Think about it, I said, giving her a moment to process. Now imagine if I told you I was sleeping with a young woman from work, someone 5, maybe 15 years younger than you. She has a toned body, full breasts, and she's putting her all into the relationship. It's fresh, and she's giving it all her energy. Imagine me coming home to you after seeing her a couple of times a week. How's your ego then? Maybe it's a little fragile too. Barbara's face turned pale. Yes, she muttered, her voice barely audible. You never truly understood. I continued, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. I was never blind to the truth. I know you're not the most beautiful woman in the world. To be honest, I could walk out right now and, without much effort, find several women who many would consider more attractive. I glanced at her, but she didn't raise her eyes. Her head bowed in silence as tears streamed down her cheeks. You're not the most beautiful, not the smartest, and not even the funniest. But to me, you were all of that. In my eyes, you were everything, where others might see flaws. I saw the life we've lived together. Your breasts aren't as firm anymore because they nourished our children. Your body has changed because it carried them into the world. The lines on your face came from the laughter and joy we've shared together. When I looked at you, I saw our entire life etched on your body. Every scar, every change. It all told the story of the years we've walked hand in hand, and I cherished every detail. Slowly, she raised her head, her face twisted in pain as if bracing for the final crushing blow. And now what do you see now? God help me, I thought. She's literally asking me to say the cruel words she's expecting. It would be so easy. A part of me, a large part of me, wanted to deliver that final destructive blow. The blow that would break her so completely that she'd spend years trying to rebuild her self-esteem, seeking comfort elsewhere. And yet there she stood, chin raised, ready for it. But here's the thing. It's no longer about delivering the final blow. And it's not just about Barbara anymore. She looked in the mirror, saw time slipping away, and decided she could escape it by running into the arms of a young man. And when everything collapsed, she tried to hold her head high, throwing challenges and sharp words. But now we both understand she's fragile, small, and soon she'll be alone. As for me, I've already cried my tears alone in the car at a quiet park not far from home. For months, I wore a mask of indifference, silently mourning the slow, inevitable death of our marriage, all while living in the same house with a woman who had betrayed me. Now it was time to figure out what to do next with my life. The first question was simple. Who did I want to see in the mirror every day? A man who unleashed his anger when the chance came. A man who claimed an empty victory over a broken woman who had already destroyed her own life. A bully? No, I wanted to be the man I knew I could be, a man capable of mercy, kindness, and honesty. I took a deep breath and gently placed my hand on Barbara's. What do I see now? I repeated her question softly. Now I see the woman I spent the best years of my life with. I see the one I trusted with my heart until I couldn't anymore. I gently squeezed her hand softly and tenderly. I see a woman I will miss. She slowly stood, trying to smile, though her lips trembled. The smile couldn't hide the tears still streaming down her face. It doesn't have to end like this, she said, her voice shaking. We can still fix this, find our way back. I sighed heavily. No, Barbara, we can't. You were right about one thing, I continued. I'm not fragile, but my trust was, and I can't put myself in that vulnerable position again. I can't let you back in. Yes, we could stay together, sleep in the same bed, go on trips, make new memories, but I'd always wonder. Wonder about what? She whispered. I'd wonder if you were judging me, comparing me to someone else. I'd wonder if you stayed out of love, or just because it was easier. That's not fair, she whispered. I'm not going to live like that. I finished, my voice firm and final. I believe I have several decades of life ahead of me, and the thought of spending them with someone I don't trust is unbearable. I'm not ready to accept a life where I have to pretend to feel safe and comfortable when those emotions aren't real. I know I deserve better. If you truly love me, you wouldn't want me to go through this. No one should. Despite all of Barbara's legal experience, I could always see through her, especially at moments like this. I watched her mind at work, selecting arguments, testing them in her head to figure out which might work. But then I noticed that precise moment when she realized it was over. Her eyes dimmed as if something inside her had extinguished. From that point, she decided not to resist any longer. After that, the divorce process went quickly. We exchanged jewelry for tools, a television for furniture, and I got my partially restored car. In the end, we sold the house, split everything equally, and avoided major legal expenses. But a divorce doesn't end with just signing papers. I still see Barbara often at our kids' birthdays, family gatherings, and during the holidays. She's changed a lot. The confidence in her eyes is gone. She's gained a lot of weight, and she even started dressing poorly. She's lost her self-esteem, and yes, I'm partly to blame, but she deserved it. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.